Tell you what, man, that's a movie. That was a movie. I was I was impressed with what they did with that movie. I'm intensely curious to see where they're going to go with this. But I'll save that for my full-on review of this movie in a week or so. I think that's the end of next week. So I'll wait a little while longer before I post my spoilery reaction. But I enjoyed that movie immensely. They did a and then let's see. I didn't get much else done today. I got there too late for the showing that I meant to get there for, and then it was too early for the next one. I ended up seeing it in 3D, which I don't know that offered as much for the movie as like seeing it in 3D. I don't think added anything special to that movie, but um, Easter egg filled, character development done well, heist style story done well. Like all of it was done well. It felt like multiple movies in one. And I if I dare say so, I feel like it felt like 3 movies. It was only 3 hours long, which it's only 3 hours, but it felt like each one of those was a full length 2.5 hour movie. So when they did it, like they got a lot achieved in that movie. It was tightly packed and well achieved. So if you haven't seen it yet, if you get the chance, Endgame is definitely worth seeing it. Um, I'm trying to think, like I kind of want to take my mom to see it. Um, like I don't think she's watched any of the other Avengers movies. So like I feel like there should be like a lead up to. Like here is the, 2 or 3 movies that'll bring you along for the ride towards the Marvel Infinity War Endgame pairing. Because to me, that was perhaps one of the best movie pairings. Infinity War and Endgame as a pair of movies go. I don't know if I can even call them a pair because they all depend on oh, they pick up so many threads from the other movies. Like it's hard to hold it in isolation. Like things that happen that are important events in the Endgame movie and even to a certain degree the Infinity War movie. Like in Infinity War, the psychological scars of the first Avengers movie on Tony Stark are a key factor. And in this movie, there are factors, and I try not to spoil any of it, but there are factors that lead back to character moments in Civil War, Winter Soldier, Iron Man 3, um, like Guardians of the Galaxy events. I don't know that there are any movies that don't have at least something that was set up in another movie that have like they all have an importance to the events as they happen in Endgame. And I just feel like I mean, I haven't seen Spider-Man Homecoming yet. So maybe there's something on that one that doesn't really add anything to the character. But like I like characters of Spider-Man in Infinity War and Endgame, I feel like there were parts of that character that I don't quite get. Like, I think this is, like, brilliantly written as, like, if you have Infinity War and Endgame, it feels like everything is led up to this pair of movies. Like, everything is setting the stage for them. To me, that's brilliant writing. That is a skill for handling a world building and character development arcs. I'm still rambling about this movie. Like, I should save some of it for my review, but I mean, as the topic of my channel oftentimes is reimagining and examining and reviewing media, I feel like it's important to point out an example of a movie where the writing and the character development is handled so well. And it's going to be a little hard to do non spoilery right now. Because, like, I feel like giving examples of Endgame story elements that are built off of things that precede this movie are important fact. Like, I want to think about this almost like if we were to look at, like when I talk about remaking this, like the what if or reimagining the Star Wars movies, like the prequels are like I feel like with Infinity War and Endgame, they feel like epic movies of all time, almost like I'm trying to think like what's the biggest, most successful, most amazing movie of all time? Like Star Wars did well, but I don't know that we can call the like looking at those, they're okay stories, but like the most tightly done, most amazing movie out there. If you built a main trilogy and built a world around them with illustrative stories for characters that flesh out that main trilogy. With Infinity War and Endgame, it feels like this pairing is such a hub. It is it is a pair of movies that I don't think you could pull off without building up with the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But at the same time, it makes the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe feel like just the appetizer for this pair of movies. And I don't know where they're gonna go next from here. Like, I'm having, like, a legitimately hard time imagining where you go from here. This I mean alright. Like, I will work on my spoiler-filled review for next week. Y This one definitely, I think you need a bigger screen to deal with. I don't know that you need 3D. I got there. I was going for the 240 show, and I got there at 2:45, and so I took some time and went over to another place and got something to eat. Came back thinking, well, the next one on the schedule that I saw said 3:40, and I got to the register and they go, "Do you want the 3:10 showing?" And I'm like, "Is there a 3:10 showing?" Because it was literally like 3 minutes before 3:10. I went, "I guess so," and they're like, "It's 3D though," and I'm like, I hadn't planned on spending extra for a 3D version of it. I don't feel that the 3D added anything to it for me. Um, I I feel like you don't have to see it in 3D. I don't know, like, I haven't seen it in 2D, so I can't compare some of the big epic battle scenes to see if they look differently in 2D, but I felt sometimes there was so much going on the screen at one time that the 3D kinda messed with it a bit. But, I do think on a big screen will make it easier to keep track of some of the stuff. I feel like on a even like a big screen TV at home, I feel like that might feel small enough that it may feel crowded. Being in the theater, seeing it all, like, in a huge space in front of you lets it feel like a sizable environment that events are happening on, and it makes it easier to kind of feel like you're in it rather than far away looking down on it. So I do think seeing it in the theater is probably pretty good. If you haven't seen Infinity War, you need to see that before you see this. Um, but oh, like I'm I think when I may do a two-part review for it, like a non-spoiler review. Oh no. Like what I really want to do is sit down and do a full breakdown of I may end up doing it sort of as a live video because the edit time and the upload time are brutal otherwise. I may private a li it's sort of like live stream, but set it to private and then make it public afterwards. Because I think that would be an easier work for me to achieve. Like, I've got a lot to say on this, and it's easily gonna be it's easily gonna be a half an hour video again, and the last time I did a half-hour video, it took 5 hours to get it up onto the internet. Whereas if I do this, like, I sit down, I start, and an hour later, I've got a video. And it's an hour-long video, so I think I'm gonna do that. But the reason I say that is the movie itself is a good story for the movie itself. So if you could strip it of all the things that connect it to all the other movies, it would still be a decent movie. This movie paired with Infinity War makes a good duology of uh, putting elements together, giving you the stakes, giving you that mid-movie sense of loss and defeat from the hands of victory feel that's so integral for a pair of movies or a trilogy where you have the stakes given to you and then to set you up for the next movie and to set up the stakes and set up the power of the next and make you even more invested in the outcome on the second movie. That first movie does that really well. And so as a pair, these movies do that really well. But also, Infinity War by itself is a really good movie. And so you have two movies that are good by themselves, are great together, and as a hub to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the way that things are woven together, it reminds me of when I was talking on one of these episodes of these live episodes that I do. I was talking about that book that I've been playing around with a plot for a while, where um, all the characters have their own short story, but each of the short stories interconnect with each other as you pass through the city. And each of those stories connects to the overstory and the understory of characters through that main first book of 13 short stories with a overstory and an understory on top of it. Like that clockwork mechanism of all the parts feeding into the theme and story and structure, but being integral, important stories by themselves. Like they're well orchestrated stories about individuals and events that happen, but in a whole, they fill out the rest of the story, and I feel like Marvel Cinematic Universe has achieved that. If you look at all the Marvel movies up till now, their story of the Infinity Stones as they're encountered make them like the understory, and the story of all the characters lead them to the point of the story of these 2 movies, and the overstory is sort of the common moment of being a hero and the sacrifices you make to be that hero and fight an evil that needs to be fought is sort of the overstory on this, and, like, they've stitched it together in a way that's just beautiful. And so, I feel like the hard part about reviewing this movie is you're not reviewing a movie, you're reviewing a story that ties together 10 years of story, character, and world building. And I think it was handled beautifully. And it's an example of like, it's not perfect. There are a few points where things fall through and they have to tweak things a little bit. But overall, like that, nothing's perfect. But this gets really close. And I feel like as an example of where to go in world building and character story arcs and really fleshing out the meaning and the emotional impact in a greater story setting that takes place over more movies or books than just one, but making each one of those segments that builds up to it a powerful and important concept in and of itself. Because there are elements of Ant-Man and Ant-Man and Wasp in particular that play into this movie. But the Ant-Man and Wasp movies stand on their own. They're story elements from the first Avengers movie that play into this movie. They're story elements from the Agent Carter TV series that play into this movie. They're elements in the Winter Soldier and Civil War that play into this movie. There's not a lot to come out of Iron Man 3 in this movie, but we do have some elements from Iron Man 2. We've got Doctor Strange, we've got the Black Panther. Like, I mean, there are pieces of it's so well put together. uh, yeah, I love when I find a piece of work like that. It's well thought out and it's well organized. It's sort of like I don't know if you ever saw the old Babylon 5 TV series. When they made that series, they knew how they were going to end the series, and they built the stories of the episodes to lead from where they started the series to where they ended the series, and they wrote key points along the way to make things happen in that sequence. And that well thought out, like not meandering and like figuring it out as you go, but like well thought out, well built, so that the whole story of the events of the series are a powerful story, but each character along the way has their own highs, lows, and growth and loss, and like to handle that in the way that this Marvel Cinematic Universe did, and Babylon 5 did as a TV series. I mean, the special effects for Babylon 5 are dated. I think they were kind of dated when they made the series. But that aside, like I love when they build the world and they build the characters and they figure out the character arcs before they even make it. So that you know when they're making these things that the depth and strength of those elements through the series is going to be great. The whole series is going to be great because of that. But each individual installment, every episode of Babylon 5, every movie in the MCU, each one of these as a standalone story is executed beautifully. I mean, I may not care for all the movies to the same degree, but I don't think I've ever seen one of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies where I thought, I didn't need to see that. Like Thor is probably by far the one. Well, I guess the Incredible Hulk movie is also considered a MCU movie, but I would say by far Thor is the one that I see as one of the roughest MCU movies. But I'm not mad I saw it, and I don't feel like I guess you could go through it without seeing Thor 1 and 2. There's no great loss there. And you might be able to get away without Ant-Man. Ant-Man and Wasp, while I think it's probably not as good as, well, no. Like for Ant-Man and Wasp to make sense, you have to watch Ant-Man. And I think Ant-Man's the better of the two of those. Oh, it's so hard. Like I don't know that I could weed any of them out and not lose some kind of context for the overall story of these last two movies, the Infinity War and uh, Endgame. What movies did I mean, they all sort of feel like they belong. I mean, if you use Winter Soldier and Civil War to carry some of that story arc, you can kind of leave out the Ant-Man and Wasp pair of movies. You can leave out the Thor and Thor Dark World as long as you have the original Avengers movie to illustrate who Thor is and what are the consequences. And then you can, if you include Winter Soldier and Civil War, you're introduced to the Black Panther. You don't necessarily need the Black Panther movie. Uh, you might be able to get away with leaving Doctor Strange out. I guess you could kind of leave that out. It might it might feel a little clunkier. but I feel like you could maybe like, I'm thinking about if I'm trying to introduce my mom to this cinematic universe, I would say Avengers or mm, Iron Man 1 and 2, Avengers, Captain America, Captain America Winter Soldier, Civil War, uh, and then I feel like you could probably do the Age of Ultron. Like, I don't even know you have to do that one, but I feel like it's part of it. I mean, I just it feels like so much interweaves together, and I feel like if you watched these two movies without a lot of that behind it, it wouldn't make sense. And what do you need to set it up? Like that's why, like when I talk about the prequels, the Star Wars prequels, um, they do some world building and everything, but I think one of the things that makes it a rougher prequel series is the whole thing has so little impact on the rest of Star Wars. Like the you have Anakin becomes Darth Vader, Obi-Wan becomes a hermit, Luke and Leia are split up when they're babies and their mother is dead. Nothing else that happens in the prequels seems to really have an overarching consequence for the main trilogy. Okay, so Marvel. Let's look at a list of the Marvel movies. Sinverse movies are there in there? What counts? Like, there's just so much, and it's sort of like beautiful that they've built such a wide and long series of movies that you can't prune pieces of it to get a tighter fit because everything is important. So Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, the First Avenger, and then the Avengers movie are the first phase, I guess. Phase 2 is Iron Man 3, which I feel like you could probably leave out. Thor the Dark World, kind of leave it out. There's some important elements in it that come back. Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Age of Ultron, Ant-Man are phase 2. And again, like you could probably prune Iron Man 3. You might be able to get away with you could possibly prune Guardians. Not really though. And you need Winter Soldier. I mean, that's just a good movie in general anyway, but um yeah, Dark World, I mean there's probably about 15 to 20 minutes of Thor the Dark World that are important. I mean, if you pause if you're introducing somebody to this series, if you pause it and do like a 20-minute like here are the key points you need to know to why this is an important factor, then you could excerpt some of these. Oh, it would make a brutal way to watch a movie with somebody. But again, Age of Ultron, I think. I mean, as an intro for the Scarlet Witch, I think that's about the biggest thing you need there, and the Sokovia Accords. I don't know. I mean, there are and there's a part of Tony Stark's story arc that's important in that movie. All right, Phase 3 is Civil War, Doctor Strange, Guardians 2. Now I don't know that you need Guardians 2. Um, I mean, there are parts of it that are nice to make this work a little bit better. I don't know that you need Spider-Man Homecoming. I think with a little glossing over, you can get rid of Doctor Strange. You need Civil War. Kind of need Thor Ragnarok. I don't know that you need Black Panther. You need Ant-Man and Wasp. Well, I mean, you could watch Captain Marvel after this, but I don't know that it's helpful. I think it helps a little bit to see it before that. And then Infinity War and Endgame. Whew. Like that's like you kind of need a lot of that. Like I'm trying to really, really think because I want to share this with my family, and some of my family have not seen many of these movies, and it's 22 movies at this point. There are 22 movies in this franchise, and that's a steep order to get them involved. So I don't want to say like, "Hey, mom, I just saw these two movies in the last year, and they are incredible. I want you to watch these." Because she's not gonna understand any of it. It's not gonna make a lick of sense. And what she gets from these 2 movies, like, she could watch these 2 movies and they may be like, it's an okay action series of 2 movies." But she's not gonna get the world building and the character development that we all got over the other 20 movies. And things that are just sort of events that happen in these 2 movies will become far more powerful events if I can get her to see the other 20. But I'm thinking, like, to make these movies matter on a level that makes sense, it might be funny to do like a Cliff Notes video of the important parts of all of the movies leading up to this pair. Oh, that would be an interesting one. That in itself would be like a movie. It would be easily 2 hours long, maybe even 3 hours long. But that might be fun to try to do. So, like, what happened in Iron Man? What happened in The Incredible Hulk? Iron Man 2? Thor, you could probably sum up pretty quickly. Captain America, the First Avenger? I feel like it's important to see the first Avengers movie. Then you could quickly sum up Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World. You you really should see Winter Soldier and Civil War. Well, I don't know that you need to see Civil War. I could probably sum Civil War up in a way that's important. Um, you don't really need to see Guardians if somebody sums it up for you. Age of Ultron, again, I don't know that you need to see it if we can sum it up. Ant-Man, you might be able to get to sum up. Civil War. I'm trying to remember. I have combined Civil War and Winter Soldier so thoroughly in my brain that I'm a little worried that if I say like you don't need Civil War, I'll be clipping out a huge important part of that storyline. You don't need Doctor Strange if you summarize his because he gets a fairly decent introduction in Infinity War. If you just add a little bit of that and do a summary video, you could make that work. Guardians 2, I don't know that there was a lot added in Guardians 2 for the overarching story of the MCU, of the Endgame and Infinity War and Endgame sequence. Spider-Man Homecoming, I didn't have that, and I don't think it hurt me much. I think it made it harder for me to connect with the Peter Parker character, but I don't know that it made a huge difference. Thor Ragnarok, I feel like I could probably summarize that pretty quickly in a way to resolve any questions. Black Panther, I could probably do the same. Ant-Man and Wasp, I think there are some very important elements of that play into these movies, but not so much that I can't gloss over a little bit. Captain Marvel, you could probably gloss that one over too. So I feel like the really key ones to watch would be uh, Marvel's Avengers and Winter Soldier, possibly Civil War. But then Infinity War and then Endgame. So it is essentially a trilogy. See, the Endgame was 3 hours long. Infinity War was, I think, a little over 2. And then Winter Soldier was 2. First Avengers was 2-ish. I guess it's 4 movies to really make it work, right? And a movie-sized Cliff Notes to make the rest of it work. Oh, but that would be, I think, what I would want to do to get my mom into it, to get her to fully appreciate, like, that's a lot to get my mom to sit down and watch 4 movies in a series. I can't even remember how the first Avengers movie started. Like, do they lean you into it gently, or do they pick up from the movies that preceded it? Oh, man. I just think it's neat that they're all so important to the story, and it's hard to, like, you have to intro people to the at least some portion of those stories for it all to work out. And I feel like even if I gloss over the Iron Man movies, like the one in Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2, and even the Iron Man 3 movie, like if I gloss those over and just do an intro to the character, like it doesn't communicate as well as the actors communicated in their acting in those movies. the power and struggle that they go through. Like in Iron Man, you have this cocky, arrogant guy who gets a change in how he views the world and how he wants to help the world. And he becomes a better person. In Iron Man 2, you get a sense of how that change has made it so that he can't accept the idea of weaponizing his own creation, the thing that he made to defend and protect people around the world. He doesn't trust a government to handle that without it potentially causing more problems than the good he creates. It's why there aren't 1,500 Iron Man armors in the hands of the U.S. military or anything like that, or the UN or anything like that. He just doesn't trust them to do that. So, like, that story arc of him going through those experiences is important. And then when he goes through the Avengers movie, it leaves a stamp on that character that is the reason for events happening later in the series. And it affects the way he interacts with his teammates. It affects how he views his role in protecting the world, what he sees as the real threats in the world. Like, it so thoroughly impacts it. And that's just Iron Man. All the other characters have arcs like that, where events that happen in those movies affect how they interact in the subsequent movies, and their response and their goals and their motives evolve over the series. I think it's shortchanging them not to take you along for that ride. But I also know I'm not getting my mom to watch 22 hours of 40, 48 hours of movie. I don't foresee that ever happening. I don't think I could ever get my mom. I'm struggling to imagine getting her to see 4 of those movies. I know I'd never get her to see all of them. But I mean, it's just I love when they build a universe where there's a depth to the exploration of the world, of the characters, and the situations they're in. Whew. Not feeling great today. I treated myself to something to eat before I went into the movie, but I tried to be very careful about it because there's nothing worse than going into a 3-hour movie and having a digestive attack. By the end of that movie, my system was freaking out, but I held out. I did okay, and then I got back here after that. But my digestive system is very angry with me today. So if I cut this a little quickly short, that might be part of it. But yeah, I mean, I'm just like other trilogies. Like, I could gloss over the prequel movies for Star Wars. If you've never seen any Star Wars movie, and I sat you down, I could tell you probably in a half an hour to 45 minutes everything that happens in the prequels that you need to know. And I don't need slides, and I don't need anything important to show you in order for you to get the point of those 3 movies. And then if I showed you the original trilogy after that, you'd be good to go. I feel like I could probably do roughly the same if I did a summary of the prequels, a summary of the original trilogy, and then sat you down for the new movies. If you watched 7 and 8 and hadn't seen any of the rest, I could summarize in about an hour and 20 minutes or less all 6 previous movies, and you'd be good to go. You'd be able to enjoy the movies. I don't think you can say the same for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It depends too much on the feelings you get about characters on their journeys. Like knowing and feeling how Captain America is a person out of time. He comes from an earlier era and he never quite really gets a sense of where he fits in. And seeing that play out, you feel it. And that feeling is a part of his character, so that when you go forward into these 2 movies, the Infinity Wars and the Endgame, like that sense of like he's found a place for himself to live, but it's not necessarily where he fits in. Like he's still out of his time. And that's integral to the character in that story. And if you're watching the movies, the Endgame and Infinity War movies, they'll play you parts that make you see that. But if you haven't felt it for the last 7 movies he's been in, then it's going to feel oddly not as rich a texture of that character. And like the growth of the I want to call her Scarlet Witch. I'm talking about the Black Widow as a character. It's there. It's not quite as obvious as the rest of the characters, but she has her own character arc. And that role plays out, especially through Winter Soldier and Civil War. You get more of a sense of who she is. And where she fits in and where she doesn't fit in. And what it's like for that character to feel that way. Those are part of that character growth and development in the series. And some of that feeds into her choices and her behavior in these 2 movies. How does she relate to the Hulk? That's something that's laid out in previous movies. And, how does the Hulk play out? Just like, it's beautifully done. Like I would be curious to talk to the people that have been working on this franchise for the last decade and ask them, like, how much of this did you know you were going to do before you did it? And like, how did you synchronize and organize between different directors, ways of laying these story arcs out for these characters? Alrighty, so we're about 49 minutes into an episode where I ramble about how impressed I am with the world building and character development of the Marvel Endgame movie. I think, especially since this is a week that I've sort of taken off from creative projects, I might just call it here for tonight. But I will be back tomorrow I'm not sure what I'm talking about tomorrow. It's a week off. I can do whatever I want to talk about tomorrow, so I'll figure it out. All right. Thanks for joining me and listening to me ramble about a movie I saw, of all things to do. But have a good night, I guess.